It's no secret that here at the 1911 Syndicate, we are big fans of the 1911 and 2011 platform. But there's one 2011 that I've purposely held off on buying for over a decade. And a few months ago, I decided to finally put in an order for what I deem to be the pistol to end all pistols. Congratulations. You are ready for the next stage of your pursuit for the perfect pistol. We're aware that 2011s are your vice, and to build you the ultimate 2011, it will come with a price. If you want the best, you will have to go on a quest, head to the falls, but brace for ice. One wrong step, and it's no dice. Signed, Strayer.
Three words. That's all it took to convince me on what gun to get in my pursuit for the ultimate pistol. The words landed so heavily because they were spoken by a competitor. And they said, "Infinity is God."
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoyed the intro today. today's video is on a very, very special firearm, which would be the, I would give you a model like the Infinity XYZ, but there is no model because as we will talk about, they're all custom guns. They're all one-off. So we will get into the weeds talking about this and everything associated with it. Before we get into a couple quick thank yous, one to Peace of Mind. You can check them out. We do not have them linked down in the description just because we don't. But they carry a lot of the gear that we cover on the channel. Check them out. There's a code that you guys can plug in. It is February, all lowercase, February 1911. That'll save you 5% off their site. A lot of the stuff that we talk about on this channel, not only do they carry, but they actually have in stock. So highly recommend you check them out. Another thanks to FLP, Firearms Legal Protection. They do basically concealed carry insurance and just general defense insurance, right? If you're in a legally justified shooting, they will cover you, unlimited attorney fees, crime scene cleanup, all kinds of stuff. There's a code that you can plug in there. 1911 saves you about a third off of their service. And then the final, I guess not thank you, but hey, if you're looking for ways that you can also support the channel aside from supporting our sponsors, we've got our Patreon. Our first class that we're doing this year with CTT Solutions is almost sold out. It's a Patreon only class, but check and see if there's any spots left on that. But we do a bunch of behind the scenes content, all kinds of cool stuff on that. Last thing, if you need real estate help, let us know. That is what we do. That is the primary thing that keeps the lights on here at the Syndicate since our channel is not monetized. Real estate's probably the best way that you can support us. 1911syndicate.com. Check that out. With the plugs over, let's get into this, okay? I think it's very important on a gun like this, because to me, this is a significant gun, and I'll tell you why. But to me, on a pistol like that, I think it's very important to say, let's take a step back, right? We don't need to talk about serrations already and all that kind of stuff. Let's talk about, so who is Infinity, right? Because some of you know them, some of you don't, and some of you probably have a little bit of a skewed opinion on what they actually do and who they are, right? So, quick history lesson. Infinity has its origins in 1989. In a garage, right? Which is how all great companies are started. So in that garage came what would become the birth of the 2011, right? And one of the people involved in the birth of the 2011 would be Sandy Strayer. Now, if you fast forward the clock now to 1994, essentially what happens is the band breaks up, right? As happens to many good bands. So part of the band breaking up leads to the creation of STI, which we now call Staccato. So STI says, hey, look, we're going to go the production route. We do some competition guns back then, not so much now. Now it's just production, more duty use style 2011s. But they said, hey, we are going to go the production route. And then Sandy says, hey, we are going to go the route of producing everything in-house and doing full-on custom guns, okay? From that, SVI is born, AKA Infinity. And there's two things that people are going to associate with Infinity. Race and competition-oriented pistols, right? And then crazy, wild aesthetic guns, right? And you will notice that no two of them look exactly alike, and we will get into how that works. I'm gonna tell you this, Infinity is probably the most impressive thing that I've actually seen inside of the gun industry. And I'm gonna give you a little bit of background a couple minutes from now in terms of the Infinity experience and really kind of how that thing just wowed me. Here's the best way that I can describe Infinity, which, by the way, is based in a very tiny town in Texas, like a couple hours from Dallas. And the way that I describe Infinity is it's Formula One racing for pistols. I'm not sure if they told me that or if I made that up. If I made that up, you can use that. You can put that on a t-shirt, but it's in Formula One racing for guns, right? Where everything is based around performance. If I told you, right, let's just say that you watching this, that you're like you're amazing at building 2011s, right? Now, technically 2011's a, STI trademark term, but I don't really give a shit for this video. I'm calling them 2011s. So let's just say that you're a 2011 builder. And I said, look, I need you to make me the most high speed, high performance, badass 2011 that exists. And I need you to make about 600 of them a year. You would say, okay, cool, great. I'm going to come up with a perfect design and I'm going to get perfect at tuning this thing so it's just majestic. That would be your path of least resistance, right? Is to come up with a thing that you make 600 times a year. And that is the polar opposite of what Infinity does. Every single gun is a custom gun. No two are the same. And that is just a baffling thing. And again, they do this about 600 guns a year, right? Which is public knowledge, and there's no, reason you can't know that. I asked them if I could tell them, hey, yeah, they make about 600 guns a year. So They're a company that relies heavily on creativity, but it's creativity that is rooted in performance. And I've asked them, like, so if I said I want you to make this crazy looking thing, but you know it's not going to perform well, will you guys make it? Nope. And they will deny those orders. Like, nah, we're not going to do that because we make shit that works and performs. It races like a race car. And it just also looks crazy, or it looks dull. It could look whatever you want it to look like, right? That's the beauty of a custom pistol. And so part of that sort of inspiration that I think they rely on over there, in my opinion, right, in my experience, comes from the top, right? And Infinity is a family-owned business, right? Sandy Strayer started the business, and now Brandon largely runs it, aka Sandy's son. And the best way I can describe Brandon to you is he's a madman. Okay, he is a madman. And I mean that as a compliment, right? There are certain entrepreneurs and people own businesses that kind of take a passive role about it, right? They sit in the corner office and their feet up on the desk and they make sure that everyone's doing their job and the business runs smooth. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with running a business that way. That is not how Infinity runs. The people that own the shop are there before the sun comes up building guns. Like they're covered in carbon, in grease, in shit. That sounds weird, but like they are dirty. I was going to say dirty men that build guns. But that's also not what I mean. They build the guns. That's what happens, right? They build the guns. Like they're in it, right? They're not just saying, "Oh, you guys, you're the engineers. You figure out how to build a gun." Like, no, we're doing it, and we own the company. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about my experience and how I came to acquire my gun. Okay, so let's talk about how I came to acquire my Infinity. Because Infinity is not a brand that I'm unaware of. Like I've known about Infinity for probably a decade now. And so what happened was, if you went back on our channel, I don't know, year and a half from the time that we're releasing this, we did a review on a Combat Precision, and this was my first custom 2011. And without relitigating the case for that, it was, in my opinion, an underwhelming experience. So I wound up selling that gun, and I call someone who's in the 2011 world, a manufacturer, right? If I'm just gonna call it like it is. I call a manufacturer, and I say, hey, look, I've got about this much budget to spend on a custom 2011. And here's the brands that I'm looking at. I already own stuff from you, so you can be neutral. You can be a neutral party in this because you don't really have anything else to sell me. So between this shop and this shop, which one would you take? And he said, because honestly, I know too much about this stuff now, and I wouldn't do either of those. And he said to me, the best sales pitch I've ever heard for anything. He said, Infinity is God. And I was like, that's, you got me. You got me. Like, that's the best sales pitch I've ever heard for anything. So literally the next day, I sent a message to Infinity and I just said, hey, my name's Jake Dwyer and I would like to order a gun. And notice the language I just said there. I would like to order a gun. And I would like to highlight the fact that, hey, this gun was paid for. It's not a free gun. This is not a paid video, none of that. This is a gun that I paid for with my hard-earned money from stripping on Sunday nights. So I made it clear when I approached them, look, I don't do competitions. I don't need an open gun, none of that. I'm looking for a workhorse 2011. I'm your average range goer, home defense guy. That's the kind of gun that I'm looking for. And so you start the process of ordering it in Infinity, and it can be a little logistically challenging. They have a feature on their site, it's like a gun builder feature. And you start going through this to build your gun, and you are getting asked to specify what style of thing that you want, and you can't even figure out what that thing is. Like, I don't even understand what you're asking me right now. And so, because guys, I'm telling you, you choose everything. I mean, you choose everything. And so I just decided to call him, right? I'm talking to Kelsey over there. If Kelsey sees this video, right? She had the pain in the ass of dealing with me, I'm sure. And she gets to the section of the conversation. She goes, what style grips do you want? And I was like, metal, like, I want metal grips. I don't want polymer grips on a, Super Gucci 2011. And she's like, well, yeah, but like what style? I was like, I don't understand the question. She's like, well, what size? And, do you want the cutout? Not? And I'm like, I don't understand what you're asking me right now. And she's like, no worries. She goes, what we're gonna do, we're gonna send you a box of grip modules and test them all out, put them in your hand, see what feels best, and we'll make you one of those. And I was like, look, this is super cool. I feel very first-class gun buying experience right now. But just to clarify, right, because it's okay, but like, are you offering this because I do reviews and you know there's going to be a review? Or is this something you would do for anyone? She's like, well, no, if it comes up, you know, if someone pays the deposit on their gun, which I think is $1,000 if I remember right, to reserve your spot, if you will, and build out your gun, and you need clarification on which grip you want, we'll send you the grips, you can try them out. So I get this immaculate box of grips and they're all wrapped up and everything. I try them and there's prepaid shipping label in the box to send them back. And I'm just like, this is the experience that I was looking for. It's really amazing. So fast forward the clock, right? Lead time on these averages about 10 months, okay? Just to give you a sense. And also, again, not to like relitigate the case, but my first custom 2011 was 2 years and 11 months. So we're talking about a completely in-house made gun that was a 10-month, sub 10-month lead time, somewhere in that ballpark, right? So what happened was around October, September, October, I fly to Texas, right? I was going there to work with the whiskey blendery to do the syndicate whiskey and a couple other things. And Infinity was nice enough to have me out, and I got to go through a one-day version of what they call the Infinity experience. And I think that this is something I was excited to tell you guys about, okay? So typically the Infinity experience is a 2-day event. And of importance, anyone can attend it. You don't need to already own an Infinity, and if you don't own one, you don't need to order one when you're there. You can simply pay the admission to go to the 2-day Infinity experience. And basically how it works, day one is an immersive breakdown on the gun, okay? And I went through this process with them. To the point, I'm sure I'm their worst customer ever because I frequently call them and ask them if they can tell me how to do a particular thing. And I'm sure they're going, idiot, that was the whole point of the Infinity experience, was to teach you this. But like literally, I mean, you leave with all the tools that you need to basically ever work on your gun, unless it's like legit gunsmithing things. And you leave with the knowledge of exactly how this thing works. I mean, literally every single part winds up coming out of the gun and you learn the system of your gun. So you do that the first half of the day, and then in the afternoon you shoot. Their facility has something to the effect of about 15 different range bays. So I mean, they've got an impressive facility and a bunch of different ranges there. So you shoot in the afternoon. Day two, you go through a facility tour and then you shoot again in the afternoon. The facility tour is very, very impressive. So here's what I would tell you about this. This entire gun is made in-house. And let me clarify what I mean by that, because I know what everyone does, right? If we put it into AR-15 terms, people go, well, yeah, okay, yeah, you make that gun, but like you don't make your lowers, because like almost no one makes their own lowers. And you're like, yeah, that's true, but we say we make it all in-house. Okay, cool. So what is it that Infinity makes on this? Well, it's probably easy to tell you what they don't make. So they do not make this Surefire X300. They do not make this Aimpoint Acro. And they don't do their DLC coding in-house because if you don't know this, no one does. That's just a whole separate operation that like no manufacturers actually do on their own. Everything else on this gun is made in their facility in Gordon, Texas. From the frame, to the slide, to the grip module, to the hammer, to the springs. Now, no one makes their own springs, guys, because that's just full rabbit hole nerd stuff, right? Infinity makes their own springs. So when I say everything on this gun is made in their own facility, I mean everything, more than any other manufacturer I've ever seen. It's impressive, okay? So why would they do something like make their own springs? Well, here's the best way I can put it to you. So while I'm at the Infinity experience, Brandon said something that I found to be really interesting. He said, we're not gunsmiths, we're engineers. And to me, that was a fascinating line, right? So if we take me, I love the 1911, 2011 platform because I love it. There's obviously a long history in the US and there's significance in 2 world wars and all that kind of stuff. While Infinity shares some of that, of course, love of the platform, in my eyes, they almost use this as their basis for making a race gun, not so much because of the history of it, because it's simply the best thing. And if we're gonna tune you up and make you the ultimate like shooting pistol, this is your best bet of getting to that level. And some of the romanticism, if you will, is dropped in favor of performance and functionality. And like the extractor, for example, that's their own design, right? Like that is an Infinity exclusive, it's patented, they're the only ones that they could use it. And while that is time consuming and costly to re-engineer a part, you go, well, why would they do that versus just use what's out there? Because they're dealing with a game of like millimeters of performance gain, right? They look at it and they go, well, if we can re-engineer a part, even though it costs more money and it takes more time and everything, if that makes the shooter 1% better with this, and we're playing in the game of competition world where that 1% might be the difference in winning or coming in second place, they're like, no, we're gonna give them that 1% performance edge. And to me, that is fascinating. So to kind of wrap it up, at the end of the Infinity experience, I jump in my sweet Dodge Ram rental truck, and I call my buddy Kane. Hey Kane, I call Kane, who owns an Infinity, right? He had the first Infinity I ever shot. And I just said, and you know, he's done the Infinity experience, so he knows. I called him up and I said, man, this is gonna sound weird, but I'm like, that was inspiring. Like that was inspiring to see a company that cares so much about creating the best thing that they can possibly do, where no corners can be cut because the margin for error is like razor thin. To me, that is inspiring. And I've told people this, look, the Infinity experience is the best sales pitch I've ever seen. Because what's cool is, again, you don't have to have their gun in order to go. And if you don't own one of their guns and you go, I can tell you with some level of assurance, you're probably gonna order one of their guns while they're there. So with that said, let's actually talk about this gun. Okay, so with all of that said, let's finally talk about the gun. Here's the first thing I'm gonna tell you about getting an Infinity. It comes in a case, I'm not gonna tip this over so all my stuff doesn't fall out, but it comes in a case that leads you to believe there's some significance here. Like, this is something that a nuke would come in, you know? Not a big one, but you know, one that still do some damage though, you know what I'm saying? I'm a sucker for a good case. You spend a lot of money on a nice gun, I want a nice case. So, let me tell you, and I actually talked to Brandon over at Infinity about this, in terms of like, hey, what are the first things that you do when you get in a new 1911, or 2011 in this case? And the first thing that I always do when I get a new 2011, right, is you just kind of like, you're checking fit and finish, right? And you're just kind of pulling on slides. There's that lateral play, that up and down, like, where is the play in this? And the answer for this particular gun is none. There is no play whatsoever. It is an extremely tightly fit gun. There's a term that people throw out. It's like it's on ball bearings. And that term is used way too much by people that I don't think understand what ball bearings feel like. Well, this is a gun that feels like it is on ball bearings. Like there is just no hint of resistance or anything. It's just a perfect frame to slide fitment on that. Okay, so let's talk about the trigger. The trigger is the second thing that after fit and finish, I typically look at the trigger. So this is a heavy Infinity trigger on my gun because I requested a specific, you know, type of, you know, break and trigger weight and all that kind of stuff. So this trigger is about 2¼ pounds. Now, for most of you, you're like, hot damn, that sounds light. Yes, sir, it is. But it is right at the bleeding edge of what is just perfect. It's just perfect, okay? So I know you won't be able to see this particularly well, but like there is a little bit of take up and we will talk about that because again, this is purpose driven, right? But once you hit that wall, it's just nothing. I mean, it's just, you ever had like a Wagyu steak, right? And you take that first bite of it and it's just perfectly done and you're just like, yes. Yes, like this is the good stuff. This is the good stuff, my friend. That's what this trigger is. It is absolutely perfect at just over 2 pounds. Now, when I told them, they're like, what do you want your trigger weight to be? I was like, I typically run like 3.5 pound, you know, triggers, and that's kind of like perfect. And they were like, you could almost tell like they were disappointed in my answer in that, like, okay, nerd. And most of their competition triggers, which I felt when I was at the Infinity experience, are like a pound or a little over, to the point where you're just like, bro, if you train on this trigger all the time, you will be mind-blowing with it. But like if you bounce around from gun to gun, a 1 pound trigger is not what you need on your gun, sir. But this just over 2 pound trigger, I mean, it's amazing because you would think that would just, you would just be like just torching off rounds sooner than you expected, but you don't. Like it's just this weird, crazy thing where it's just perfect. It's the best trigger I've ever felt on a gun, period. Now, they do have a new trigger modification, which is really interesting. And this is actually different than the original trigger that was on my gun. So the mod that they have is basically, I believe it's just the trigger bow, right, that they sell. I think it's a kit. Don't quote me on that. I'm almost positive, right? But the point of it is that, one, they're making it for guns other than their own. So this is an actual like production part that you can buy and drop into your Staccato or SDI, or if you have an Infinity frame, it will also drop into that. I do believe they're working on one for the Prodigy. I'm not sure if that's out yet, but basically what it lets you do is adjust the pre-travel and the over-travel, right? So with this same, I would have to just take off a couple components, but you put in an Allen key, and you can, again, the take up that is in this, you can make that nothing. So literally, instead of that take up, it's literally just that. Like you're simply on the wall and the trigger just breaks, right? With 2 pounds of pressure on it. Same thing, you can adjust the over travel. So if you're someone who's like, hey, sometimes this might be a competition race gun and I want no take up, I just want to just be on the brake and on that bleeding edge all the time, cool, great. And if you're like, hypothetically, maybe this is my duty use gun, or it's going to be my bedside gun, right? And I do want a little pre-travel just because that's not the time in a self-defense scenario when I want to be right on that edge. I want that little bit of pre-travel. So it's a really cool mod. I'm not sure how much they're selling them for, but they come in a few different colors and a few different lengths, right? So this is the medium length trigger. There's a short, there's a long, and there's some nice texture that they put on that trigger. So you, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but now your trigger does have some texture just in case, hey, with gloves or, you know, sweaty hands or whatever it is, you have a really, really nice, just a rock solid placement of your in the relation of your finger to the trigger, right? So that's trigger fit and finish. They're both phenomenal. Let's talk a little bit about the frame. As you'll notice, mine is railed, right? They, of course, will make a gun that is not railed or railed, right? Like it's really up to you because, again, they're doing custom guns. The grips and the texture, phenomenal. You will notice on mine, I'll try to hold it there maybe so you can see through it a little bit. You will notice that obviously there's the cutout, right, that goes directly through the gun. It's more aesthetic than anything else. It does technically shave a little bit of weight. Is that the reason for doing it? I don't know. It's just kind of cool, right? Sometimes you just want a couple little cool touches. And the little Mobius, I guess they call it, on the inside, it's basically their little Infinity logo. It's just really, really cool, right? So we've got that. It's not a super aggressive grip. It's really in that like perfect sweet spot. Any more aggressive than this, and to me, it's typically just unnecessary. Let's talk about the beaver tail or the grip safety. So you will notice on this, it's non-functional. And we had a good conversation about it when I was out there. I was like, hey, so, you know, just curious, you know, why is that a thing that you guys do? Now, I think they probably will make you a functional grip safety. This one does not. And I'm typically been kind of against that because I'm like, I don't know, grip safety doesn't bother me, and what's the downside in it? And I have to admit, this has kind of turned me against grip safeties because it's just, you know, their perspective is just get it out of the way. Like, let's just remove something that could cause you a problem in the form of you grab a gun, you take your thumb safety off, gun of course still has a safety, and now your gun doesn't work because you either didn't have a good purchase on the gun or had gloves on or something like that. And that has happened, especially in you know, certain environments or largely with gloves where it's like you just don't depress the grip safety enough in order to actually be able to get the gun to go off, right? So I've actually kind of come around to the notion of non-functional grip safeties at this point. The magwell is pretty straightforward, not a lot to talk about there, minus it's just cool. It's got some texture on it. They'll do bigger ones, smaller ones. Actually, this might be the smaller one that they do, but they certainly have bigger ones on some of their race guns. The mag release, given that I'm a lefty, is swapped over to my side of the gun. And again, so much of what you are getting when you pay for a gun like this is the refinement in the little details. You go, is this functionally more or less like a Staccato? Yeah, sure. You know, I mean, they're the same basic platform, but you're paying for refinement and obviously customization. So you won't be able to see it. We'll try to show you some B-roll right now. There's this basically little button that's over the actual mag release button, and it's angled and sloped in a way that when your thumb comes down and hits it, there's no sharp edges or nothing. There's actually traction on it. There's actually like texture that's on the thumb release or the mag release, right? But it's angled in a way that it's like a more ergonomic mag release where you go, did anyone need to reinvent like the mag release? And you're like, not really, but it's just a better mousetrap. And you're just like, that's just great. Like, that's just a great thing, right? Let's see. The mags themselves, right? So Infinity makes their own mags, right? And they're certainly going to advise that you run their own mags. I'm not sure that you have to, but I ordered half a dozen mags just because you should if you're getting a gun from them. They will make, you know, these are, I think, like 18 round capacity. The other ones I've got are like 22 or something like that, right? So they do have a couple different lengths. I would say if I'm trying to find any criticism, mags would probably be the only thing you could even argue as a weak point, and it's not a weak point, but all that I would like to see, right, if I was, you know, Jake rules the world here, is because they make the lion's share of their guns for competition shooters typically don't care if their gun locks back on last round, right? So because they're doing mag reloads preventatively, so that, hey, I'm never actually going to slide lock, so by tuning the mags to not lock back, it gives you more capacity, right? You'll typically get a couple of, you know, 2-3 more rounds in the slide. So you gain capacity, you sacrifice slide lock, right? For me, as someone who's really not competing and wants to go to slide lock, I would just like, hey, the mag itself is fine. I would just like to see a spring that guarantees lock back. And if that means I lose a couple rounds, I'm perfectly fine with that, right? Because you might have to tune your Infinity mags just a little bit to guarantee that they do lock back. And I still have, sometimes they don't lock back, sometimes they do, sometimes it depends on the grain weight of the ammo. So it's just a little hit and miss on lock back there. The thumb safety will be the last thing that we talk about on the frame. So again, as a lefty, I always like to have an ambi safety, right? But the reality is I don't need a whole lot on this side of the gun, right? Because as I'm gripping the gun, right, everything's happening on this side of the gun. So you will see that on my side of the gun, we have a pretty exaggerated, like fat thumb safety, right? And then on the other side, it's more of a minimalist, like, hey, if you needed to switch hands, you still have a thumb safety, but it's definitely not, it's not as prominent as the other side of the gun. And again, on a gun at this price point, you're paying for that refinement. And the thumb safety is just perfect. It's this perfect amount of tension, right? Where it's like the up, down, it's very hard to describe and it's never gonna make sense on a video, but I'm telling you, the thumb safety is just so perfectly worked with how much weight it takes to take it on and off. You're just like, yeah, like you guys know what you're doing here. On the slide, so 5-inch barrel here. One of the features that I really enjoy, despite actually not having a particular use for it, is the front sight tracker. So you will notice when the slide is locked back, the front sight is not a part of the slide. So your front sight never leaves the position that it's in, because it's actually, I guess we would just say it's milled into the barrel, I guess would be the, you know, I would assume that would be how we would put that, because it's all just one piece, right? So you have that front sight tracker. Not so much an issue for me because I'm running a red dot, but for those of you who are still running iron sights, which a lot of people in competition world are, really cool that, again, your front sight is staying in the same place as that slide reciprocates. I did opt to leave iron sights on the gun. They do a really nice style on this where the rear sight is still behind the optic. I don't have much preference if a iron sight is forward or rear of the optic. It doesn't make much of a difference to me, but it is so extremely thin that it's just really, really nicely done. You don't have this big chunky rear sight because, again, you're relying on your dot. The gun is cut for an acro, and this is something that I was really excited about. I believe it's the first time Infinity had cut one of their guns for an acro, but when you look at this, there's probably a tendency to go, oh, this is some sort of plate, right? Like there's the slide, right? And then there's a plate and then the acro goes on the plate. No, it's not. Like this gun is simply milled for an acro. So the reality is I am attached to using an acro or an acro footprint really for the rest of my life. So let's hope that these hold up well over time. Hint, it is, but it is pretty cool. And you will notice that they are perfectly machined. What's going on back here is the slide, because, you know, this starts as one piece of billet and then is machined down. This is not a plate or anything as discussed, but it's basically milled in a way that there's no overhang of the optic hanging over the slide. The slide is designed to match the width of the acro. It's just the little details, but they matter. And last thing on the slides would be the serrations. I think we've made fun of this in multiple videos, but when's the last time that you tried serrations on a gun where you're like, those serrations just suck and they're just not functional? It's very rare, right? And while Infinity does all custom guns, if there was a thing that I would say would be their hallmark style, it would be these big, chunky, thick serrations. I've loved them since the first time that I saw them, and I knew when we were gonna do this gun, I'm like, I've gotta have those serrations. I know they're not necessarily the most creative or the wildest thing that you guys do, not by a long shot, but I just love them, and they're thick, and they're chunky, and like literally I did as many of them as we can. I was like, so how many of those, like how far back can you take them? Well, this far is the answer. Like we literally maxed out how many you can do, and I just love them. They're just thick and meaty, and they're great. So price on the gun, as configured, not factoring in the acro or the light, of course, would be about $7,500, right? Give or take a couple bucks. Now, for some of you, you're thinking, hey, that's really not cheap. And you're correct. That is really not cheap. But I think it's 100% a fair value. I could, as I'm trying to litigate here, I think it's probably potentially undervalued, right? Not that they should go raise their prices because I said that, but like, you know what I'm saying. Holster compatibility, don't have it on me right now, but the holster is made from QVO Tactical. That is one of the things that I was really kind of like fingers crossed going into this. A gun of this custom nature, I was just like, man, are there gonna be any holsters that fit this? Because this is not gonna fit like a Safari Land, a duty rig or anything like that. But Roger over at QVO has a mold that works for this, and it actually very, very nicely done. It did a very, very nice job on that holster. In terms of how does it shoot, right? Because so many of you are going to know, okay, so how does it actually shoot, right? A gun at that price point. So my first rounds on the gun were at the Infinity facility. And there's this unknown that you have going into shooting a gun like this, which is a gun that you have, for me personally, right, in my head, I've hyped up for so long as like, it's just like the ultimate pistol, right? And that you spent all this money on and the lead time and all that kind of stuff, you just go, can it possibly live up to the hype? You know, there's that expression where it's like never meet your heroes. And generally speaking, that has held accurate to me. Most of the people I've met that I've looked up to doesn't go quite like you think it's going to go. And so you're just like, man, this is like meeting your hero, you know, and it's like, can it live up to the hype? And the answer was just yes, right? So after the first mag, you know, I'm just like pinging steel and I shoot the first mag. You're just kind of reflecting, right? It's like you taste a whiskey and you just kind of sit there and you reflect and what am I picking up and what's going on here? And you just go, damn, that gun shoots nice. Like really, really nice. So guys, we're fortunate, right? Doing what we do and just being into the kind of guns that we're into, we get to shoot a lot of nice guns. And the reality is after a while, they all start to kind of feel like another iteration of a nice gun. You're just like, yeah, it's another nice gun. Like, it shoots great. Like, it's really nice. But it doesn't feel different than the other nice guns. It just feels like a nice gun. This is the first time in a very long time that I can tell you this shoots and feels like something different. It's just a different animal. It doesn't shoot like the other nice guns. It shoots like a better version of the other nice guns, right? And especially on a gun that's this tightly tuned and refined, you know, and you're dealing with that like high-end sports car where it's just like amped up and it just wants to race. You're just like, yeah, this vehicle's typically like they're also in the shop a lot. And you're just kind of like, how is this thing actually going to do under hard use? And there's an interesting thing, because when you ask people who know Infinity, you hear a common thread. You won't even have to ask them. You just hear people say, yeah, those guns run. Like they're known for it, which is so crazy to have something that's this sort of tightly wound up and performance driven that still wants to run. It's really pretty interesting, right? All of that said, I'm going to tell you something that's probably going to shock you a little bit, which is most of you shouldn't buy one of these.
So how, after that glowing review, could I possibly say that not everyone should go out and order an Infinity? Well, it's for the same reason I would never tell a novice whiskey drinker to buy, or even try for that matter, a Balvenie 50-year. Because you have no palate for it. You're not going to appreciate the spectacular nature of what you're experiencing. As with all fine things, it's my opinion that you should work your way up. Begin your 2011 journey with the Staccato. Work your way to a Fowler and appreciate the improvements that have been made to the platform. But you must take your time getting to the Infinity, because there's nowhere else to go. You've reached the top of the mountain. It's the tip of the spear, the pinnacle, and you must earn being able to appreciate that. To bring it back to how we got here, I'll reiterate what was told to me. Infinity is God.